Dr. Watt, here tonight, is a graduate of Grand Island High School and is currently the Chief Pediatric Anesthesiologist at Oshai Children's Hospital. She has invited a panel of local women, pioneers in their own areas of expertise, including science, engineering, technology, and mathematics, because she understands and knows how important it is for our young scholars to be given the right opportunities to be successful. So without further ado, I present to you Dr. Watt.
All right, well that's a little bit, come on Grand Island, I know we can do better because I've heard you do better. Let's give it up one more time for our panelists. All right, that's much better, see? We're ready to go now, blood's going. Excellent. So if this is your first time at the Amelia Earhart STEM panel, could you raise your hand for just a moment? All right, so we need to learn what this is about. Okay, so how many people know of Amelia Earhart? You just found her plane, hopefully. Yes, okay, good. So believe it or not, she was one of the first Zontans. And Zonta is a women's organization that's for professional women, and they celebrate women that are in leadership roles, but also involved in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math. She was an aviator, but she was also one of the people that drove forward women into medicine and into fields of scientific discovery and really paved the way for it to be okay to enter the fields of STEM. So we celebrate her in honor in Zonta, but this panel is more about just learning about what different fields are out there within the STEM fields and learning about how we can enter them, the excitement that they generate, some important things that we've learned from those things. So we use that Amelia Earhart Day, which is actually celebrated in January with Zonta, to really go forth and learn more about these fields. It's a great excuse to go forth and have this celebration, but it's important to recognize why this is here. So I'll start about telling you a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to introduce these fantastic women that have joined me tonight to celebrate their own respective fields. So I am a pediatric anesthesiologist. I work at the John R. Oshai Children's Hospital. I'm program director and interim chair of the anesthesiology residency program, and I am chair of anesthesia for Kaleida Health. The one thing you might not know is I'm the first woman in both of those positions. So, it's tough being the first of anything, but it was tough for me in transitioning into this role. So I know the importance of going forth and trying something new. But the reason why I entered all those wonderful fields and I did all these things is because I had a really good mentor. And I always ask for a theme of events. So I always ask the panelists of saying, thinking of something. So last year we talked a little bit about research and scientific discovery. The year before we talked a little bit about how we enter the fields, and we did a lot with student teaching and how it is to go into like either medical school or dental school or a further educational school, and what that transition from undergraduate to graduate is like. So we try to each year do a different theme, and this year it's on mentorship and sponsorship. So one of my mentors, his name is Michael Adragna. He's actually a pilot. So he actually built his own Cessna plane, and throughout my anesthesia residency career I bumped into him. And we really got to be not only friends, but he took on a mentorship role, and he taught me what it was like not only to be an anesthesiologist in the operating room, but what it was like to be a professional outside of the operating room and celebrate my achievements, but really be thoughtful of what I represented and how I represented those important things in not only my life, but how I brought up the next generation before me. So teaching me that link to always not only climb forward for myself, but to remember to reach behind me and bring somebody else up behind me, because otherwise it's not only lonely, but it also is less impactful if you don't have people around to celebrate. And also, think about what the world would be like if we didn't bring up people behind us and they learned from the lessons that we have been taught. It could be a very scary place out there, because I can tell you, without having anesthesiologists behind me and learning what it's like to take care of people, imagine what it's going to be like in the operating rooms 10 years from now if no one learns. So it could be scary for everybody. So the importance of mentorship is really captured here today. And I've asked our panelists to also share just maybe a story or two about maybe someone that impacted their lives as a mentor or a sponsor, and there's a difference. So a mentor is someone who's there with you all the time. It's a teacher who you can go to between periods and ask questions about not even just what you're learning in school, but what you have questions about, how you approach somebody or something, or what career you want to do. Those are mentors. They can guide you through very difficult decisions and all sorts of things. The other type is sponsors. Sponsors are people that actually go forth and really promote you, put you on committees, or really go forth and really help you advance your career by giving you opportunities. So they're the ones who go forth and say, you know what, there's a speaking opportunity. I want you to take advantage of it. I'm going to put your name in for it. Or there's a class opportunity and they need a representative. I think you'd be great. And they put your name in. That's a sponsor, so it's a little bit different. So always know that there's all sorts of people that go forth and really help us, but they're all different types, but they're all there to help celebrate us and make us and drive us forward. So without further ado, that's a little bit of the background of today. So everyone's with me? Thumbs up? Okay, we're ready. So without further ado, I'm going to bring forth my first panelist. It is Dr. Wang, Silu Wang. She is an UB assistant professor in biological sciences. Her research interests are in speciation, that's pretty, all right, adaptation, forest evolutionary genomics, and birds. She has a BS of behavioral genetics, neurobiology from the University of Toronto. She has an MA in ecology, evolution, behavior from the University of Texas at Austin. And she has her doctorate in zoology from the University of British Columbia. She has postdoc research from the University of California, Berkeley and UC Davis. And she teaches tropical ecology evolution. And let me tell you, I could speak for about an hour on the background of this young lady, but I'd like for her to come on up and join our panel. I'd like to ask a warm welcome for her, please. Dr. Wang. Everybody up. All right, we're going to introduce everybody first, and then we're going to get started with our fantastic panel. All right, next up, we have one of our dentists and also doctor, Piasecki. Did I get that right? Okay. All right, she has a UB postdoctoral of endotonics. Did I say that right too? It's challenging today, I'm telling you. All right, she has an apical limit of determination in endotonics, as well as imaging, rendering, internal anatomy of the human teeth. Look out, people, she's in dental. Ooh, yes, the look, I know. But she's going to teach you all what it's like, not to fear it, but actually maybe embrace that. Who knows, we might have a few people going into this specialty. Graduated dentistry from the State University of West. Oh wow, in Brazil. Let's just say in Brazil, okay. And at the same institution, completed specialization in endodontics, and she obtained a master's in science degree in 2011 and her PhD in 2014. So she is, let's see, has a doctor of dental surgery from the University of Buffalo. She has been a fellow in endodontics from the University of Rome. Her PhD is from also the Catholic University, also of Brazil. Thank you. And she's making me work for this one. And she has been specialty as well in Brazil. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Piasecki to the stage. Thank you. And I believe I saw our next speaker sneak in there through the side. All right, our next speaker is Cheryl Spilecki. She is the UP Program Director for our Nurse Anesthesiology program right here in the city of Buffalo. Her areas of research have been in end-tidal CO2 monitoring, post-op opioid, or basically pain medicine-induced respiratory depression. That's basically when you don't breathe too well after you get narcotics or pain meds. Emotional intelligence, and she received her education from the Virginia Commonwealth University, where she received her doctorate of nursing, anesthesia, and she has her MS degree from the University of Buffalo. She is assistant clinical professor in the nurse anesthetist program, and let's see, she is professor, professional practice chair for our New York State Association of Nurse Anesthesiology, and she is a member of the New York State Board of Nursing. Please welcome to the stage, Cheryl Spilecki. certainly not least, Dr. Sophie Nowicki. She is our UB Empire Innovation Professor that is joining us this evening. Her specialties include glaciology, ice sheet modeling, climate modeling, and sea level change. Her research interest lies in a broad field of ice sheet and sea level, and they study how sheets interact with the global climate system, and in particular affect sea level change. They use a combination of applied mathematics, remote sensing, observation, and numerical modeling to achieve this. She has her PhD in theoretical glaciology from the University College of London, and she has also has a degree in remote sensing and image processing, and her BS in geophysics from the University of Edinburgh in the UK. Please welcome Dr. Nowicki. All right, you heard from me about what we're going to be talking about this evening, but I'm going to start. What you need to hear from, though, is these wonderful panelists. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Dr. Wang to the stage.
Thank you, everyone. It's such an honor to get to share with you about my journey to become a scientist. And so I just want to start by telling you what I do and what we do in my lab at UB. So we study speciation in the rainforest creatures around the globe. So the idea for speciation is to understand the mechanism of how can we get these fascinating biodiversity. So we are just one of millions of life forms on Earth. And we share this genealogy, the history, and but now we're in this rapid global warming and rapid biodiversity loss. So it's a very important time to really understand all these other creatures besides our understanding of ourselves, and to really, recapitulate the history, where we come from, and how are we, moving forward with all these fascinating biodiversity on Earth. So that's the objective for my lab at UB. So why rainforest? Because rainforest harbors over 60% of the terrestrial biodiversity. And everything we do in our society rely on the actual biodiversity in the wild, from agriculture to forestry to any kind of commodities we use. The initial material really rely on these biosphere that's, all these biodiversity generate together. So, so this is, kind of accruing interest for our field in biological science, and also, increasingly important for our society. So that's, kind of what we are, and I'm going to kind of go back in time and, tell you like the steps I took to this current stage. So I grew up in a farm in China, it's a chicken farm, and I started, being very obsessed with different creatures and just started painting. So I didn't know, biology is actually, can be a career, and you can just observe and study, the genetic behavior and fascinating physiology about these wonderful creatures on Earth. So, so I was initially hoping to become a painter, an artist, until high school, and so I went into this biology class as an elective, and my first mentor really inspired me for what observations can take you as a creative biologist, on top of just purely observational. You can actually push forward of human knowledge, about understanding the life forms. So I was actually doing really poorly in high school. I was mostly, spending my time just painting and drawing creatures that I'm interested in. But somehow my mentor just thought I have a very good kind of tuning to observe animals and creatures, and she just really encouraged me to like to pursue biology as since I'm generally very fascinated about creatures, but from a very different artistic perspective. So I became like really gravitated by she was inviting me to her laboratory and was dissecting fish at the moment. So I get to learn about the inside kind of anatomy of these creatures besides my outside kind of study, just drawing them, and I became more interested in like the mechanisms and the actual organismal biology underlying it. So my family moved to Canada when I was about to start college. And I didn't know, like how can I become a biologist? So, but I know, the first thing I can do is to just enroll in biology classes and just slowly, build my way up. And I was really empowered by many women scientists along my way through college time, having the first opportunity to get involved in research, like besides coursework. So my mentor, so I was enrolled in this tropical rainforest ecology course in Costa Rica. So my mentor invited me to join her on her research project, North American freshwater turtles. So I get to, actually know what's the practice like, doing research firsthand, how to collect wildlife and and kind of dig into their genomes and looking at their DNA molecules to get more insights about the population and so forth. And so I would say, this journey would not be possible without lots of really inspiring women scientists from my undergraduate mentor thesis to master's degrees to PhD. So that's so I'm very grateful where I am and all these staffs led by various mentors along the way. Looking forward to interacting with you all later. So I'll just stop here for now.
Perfect. I want to hear more about the turtles. I was like, oh, turtles. All right. And we're going to have, so think of those questions as you're listening to each of the presenters. So as you listen to the presenters, think to yourself, either write a note down of what question you want to ask afterwards, because we're going to have a question and answer period. So please, again, think of those questions, do it in your head until all the last speakers are done. Without further ado, we're going to go on to our next speaker, Dr. Payaseski. I'm going to get it, I swear. All right.
Hello, everyone. So it's easier to call me Lucila. My name is Lucila. I'm from Brazil. I'm a dentist. I heard one of you doing like, ee. Nobody likes a dentist. I understand. I don't like it. We always think about pain, right? And my specialty is called endodontist, which is actually, do you know that feeling when you eat an ice cream very cold and then you feel pain that's cold in your tooth? Do you have that? Yeah, it's because there's a nerve inside the tooth. Actually, we call this pulp. And this is what we do. We take care of that tissue that's inside the tooth that can cause pain or can cause infections. So my specialty is all about relieving pain and preventing infections in the tooth. And well, I am at UB in South Campus, and we have our small, it's not really a department, this is a division of endodontics. I came to UB 7 years ago. I started as one of the faculty, and then last year, 2 years ago, I became the director of predoctoral endodontics. That means I am the director of my specialty among the dental students. That makes sense, right? Anyway, so I have my phone so I don't talk too much. So as I told you, I'm from Brazil. My father is a dentist. So, and we were raised We grew up in a very small town in Brazil. So have you heard about Brazil at all? Yeah. So everybody thinks about beaches and sun. No, I'm from a very boring part. The countryside of Brazil, small city, there's nothing there. We are even cold there. So my father is a dentist. His office was in our house. So we had the living room, and then you cross one door is the dental office. So me and my 3 sisters, we grew up there. So all the dental materials, that smell of dentists, my father was always ready to work. So I grew up in that environment. And when I was a kid, when I was your age, I had no idea what I wanted to do. But I didn't know many professions back then in the 80s. We didn't have internet or cell phones or anything. So my world was that profession that I was seeing from my father, right? I was watching him, I was like, hey, I think I'm gonna become a dentist. And then I thought, like, look at my father, he had his office the entire life in the house. I said, okay, so I'm gonna get my degree in dentistry, and I'm gonna come back here and work with my father. And I thought my life would be that. I was a very shy young lady. I never traveled, like, I had never took like a long far travels or something, or airplanes. So I thought that's my world, right? So I took my degree in another city. I did my degree I became a dentist. And at that time, I wanted to go back to my father's office, but my youngest sister was starting med school. So my mom wanted me to be there with her. So yeah, I stayed there in that city that was a little bit bigger. They had a dental school like Buffalo. And then I did my specialty in root canal. And after that, there was a opening to be a professor in university. I was like, oh, I think I like that. But I was like, I just graduated 5 years ago. I'm not good enough to be a professor. So, but they said, no, we need you right away. I said, okay. Then I went to a school to learn how to be a professor. Then in Brazil we call it master's. So in the master's degree, we learn how to teach, and we learn how to do research. And this was, this course that I was taking was in the capital of the state. I know the capital of the state is not New York City. It's that far of a drive. So every week I had to get in a bus. Sunday night, I would sleep in the bus, wake up in the capital, have classes. Monday, Tuesday, get a bus, go back to my city where I was teaching Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And I did that for 2 years. And then I did my research, I published, and I was done. It was so hard. But my mentor from my master's, so he told me, no, Lucila, you are doing great. You are a good researcher. You have to pursue your PhD. And I was like, I don't want to do this again. But I did. For 4 more years, I was there, sleeping in the bus, 2 nights a week, teaching. And during this time, I started doing a research using a machine that's called micro-CT. Do you know what CT scans are? When you're sick, you have to. Yeah, it's a bunch of radiographs, right? Micro-CT takes one tooth like this and transforms like 1,000 images, high resolution. So I started learning that, but no, I wanted to do my research about that. But in the dental school, everybody's a dentist. So nobody knew how to use that. So I went to the geology department. They had a machine, and there was a physicist there. So I learned with her how to use that machine, and that machine provides a high-resolution image of the tooth, and then we could study the anatomy of the tooth and understand why that pain was happening, why it was so hard for us sometimes to do our treatment. And I was working with people from other from engineers, physicists, and that opened up my mind. I was like, hey, I love doing this. I love doing research. So I finished my PhD, and when I was ready to go back, I was like, no, it can't be this. So my mentor introduced me to a professor from Italy, and he became my second mentor. So at that time, we started working remotely in some projects that I could do from Brazil, but it reached the point that I had to go there. So he offered me a fellowship, research fellowship. So basically they were paying me to go there and be a student in Rome, Italy. Oh, that's so sad, right? I was there eating pasta and working a lot. So because of that, I quit my job as a professor, I quit my job as a dentist, and I went there for a couple of months. I was supposed to be there for a year. So over there, I was working with mechanical properties of instruments. You know the tools that the dentists use in the office? They're all little, right? So I was working with engineers about those tools, trying to understand how they work, trying to develop them, improve them. So I was working with a couple of factories, helping, testing the instruments, trying to develop. We actually developed one. I have a patent in Europe that was never done, but yeah, I do have one. Great. I was learning this part. It's more like engineering. And I was also working in digital images with micro-CT. So basically we take that CT of the tooth and I make a reconstruction, 3D reconstruction of the tooth that's like this, becomes something like that. And I can look at that in my computer, I can make images, I can understand the anatomy. And now we also are 3D printing. So it's very cool, I wish I had brought some of them. So as you can see, let me go back. So I was in Italy doing my research project when I heard about this job here at UB. And I was like, never heard of Buffalo in my life. And then I came here for the interview. It was so cold. It was so cold. It was like, I don't know, it was 45 degrees. I was dying. And then everybody in Buffalo, no, it was the end of December. No, this is a great weather. I said, what? We haven't had snow because you had that very bad snow in 2014. So I came 2015 and everybody was happy that was 20th of December and you had no snow. And I was, this is cold. Anyway, so I accepted position, so I had to cut short my stay in Italy. I came here and I kept developing my 3D models. I kept working with materials. We started working with 3D printing, and I was not the first woman, but right now there's a website that's called Expert. There's a, oh my God, I forgot. There's a website that ranks the scientists according to their field. And one day I was someone posted that and I went to look and I am like the top 50 of my areas of dental instruments and tooth anatomy. I was among like the 50 names worldwide. I was like, wow. And even here in US, I was like, I don't know, among the 20, I was like, wow, I never expected that in my life. I was raised to be a dentist, to stay working in this. I expected that, I thought I would do that. I thought I would never leave home, I would be there with my father. And from that small town, science brought me all over the world. I was invited to give lectures in Poland, in Italy, in Barcelona, in Vienna. So the world, science brought me to the world. And I feel very accomplished. And as I was trying to tell, so I had my mentor in Curitiba that looked at me and said, no, you should be a scientist. And I never thought about that as a dentist. And when I was in Italy, my mentor also told me, no, you are not, you have the potential to go to greater heights. And if I went back to Brazil, it would be very hard for me to be in an institution as we have here in Buffalo, because in Brazil, we only have 2 institutions like that. So it would be, probably I would just go back and stay in the small city. But I'm very grateful that I had those 2 people that inspired me, and I think I owe it to them, whatever I've been doing nowadays. Thank you.
So I hope you heard a few of this key, and I'm going to just bring these in there. I hope you learned a lot, not only from the story, but also from things that maybe you didn't catch on. So one of the mentors in both of the stories that you just heard brought them to something that they weren't planning to go down. They showed them that that was possible, and they encouraged them to take a risk. And what happened? Look what happened. So they changed directions, and they really grew as individuals. So things to take advantage of, and listen to the kernels of things that they're telling you, because they're all incredibly important. Next speaker, without further ado, Cheryl Spilacki.
Well, thank you very much for welcoming me. I'm not from the other side of the world or from someplace super exciting and fascinating like Brazil. I am a hometown girl. I am one of you. I have been raised in the South Towns of New York and grew up in Hamburg. I'm actually a Frontier Central graduate, and I've visited Grand Island and Grand Island High School as somebody in the high school who was very much a part of track and field growing up. And so we spent a lot of time visiting other schools, trying to figure out what we wanted to be when we grew up. I can tell you, just like you probably have no idea what might interest you, that you have some time, but you also have the tools to try to figure out what you might want to do when you grow up. I think it's really important that you understand there's people out there like your parents and your grandparents and significant others that are really interested in helping you try to figure out who you are. And they know you pretty well to try to figure out what sort of profession might work well for you. What happened to me is that my older sister, who is 9 years older than me, became a surrogate mother as my mother had passed away very early on in my life. I was only 15 years old. And she felt that I had a lot of caring and nurturing in me as I had sort of developed from being under my sister's wing, and felt that nursing would be a good fit for me. She talked to me about caring for other people. She talked to me about keeping people safe. She talked to me about it being a profession that was really highly respected and a profession that is long-lived. You can decide that you want to do all kinds of nursing. Once you're in it, you can start working with babies, you can work with adults, you can work with moms who are having babies, you can work with the elderly, you can work with people that are very sick, and then you can work with people that aren't very sick but just need health care. And so as a nurse, we have a lot of opportunity to expand our wings and our interests. I was fortunate enough to go to Niagara University, and that's where I became very well informed about my opportunity as a nurse and received my bachelor's degree in nursing. I thought for sure that was it. I was more than happy to graduate with my bachelor's degree. I wanted nothing more to marry my boyfriend, who was a New York State trooper, who I think is like the greatest profession ever, and have children and have a great home life, which I did accomplish. I then turned my nursing career into experiences working in the intensive care unit. That's where people that are very ill end up with special care in the hospital. And the ICU nurses have a special way about them caring for patients that are really very sick. They have to know a lot more than the basics of nursing. they have more responsibility, and they have to have good communication with other people. After I experienced working as an ICU nurse, I knew I wanted to continue on with my education. And that's where I learned about being a nurse anesthetist. So if any of you have ever been sick or hurt, have been in a hospital and needed surgery, anybody out there need surgery? You most likely ran into somebody from the anesthesia team. Somebody that may have been an anesthesiologist, who was a doctor of anesthesiology, or a nurse anesthetist, who was a nurse who was part of the nurse anesthesiology program that also administers anesthesia. I was very interested in being a nurse and staying a nurse. I just wanted to do more. What's really nice about this get-together is to understand the importance of STEM. Nursing includes all of STEM, science and technology, working with different products, working with things that help save lives and understanding how these things work, the engineering behind products and new technology that we do use as nurses in the operating room, and also math, understanding as much as you can about mathematics, figuring out medication dosing, how much medication to give somebody, how to keep somebody safe with the number of, IV fluid, medication that you might give in an IV, medication that patients might get after surgery, understanding that math is extremely important. In my experience as a nurse anesthetist, I've been able to speak to groups across the New York area, as well as to talk with those that might be interested in advancing their nursing career. Someone who maybe have been working on the floor as a floor nurse, who's interested in advancing their career to get their master's or their doctorate. I was fortunate to go off and to receive my doctorate eventually while I was raising my children. And it just so happened in 2015, both my children and myself, we all graduated in 2015 at the same time. So needless to say, we had a big graduation party. During all that time, I was still practicing nursing. And that is the beauty of the profession. It's the ability to not only be a professional, to have a wide array of knowledge, but to be respected in your profession, and still to be a mother, be a wife, be a sister, be a good daughter, and to be able to be a part of the community as well. One of the things we like to pride ourselves is advocacy for others. As nurses, we want to protect our patients. We want to be the voice of our patients when they cannot speak. We want to keep them safe. We want to make sure that we can educate them to the best of our ability with the best evidence-based knowledge that's out there, from reading, from research, from experiments, and just from clinical practice, like having a job. It's really important that if you're considering or you're interested in STEM, to consider that nursing is probably a lot more than you think it is. And I'd be happy to talk more about that throughout the evening. Thank you.
And I can tell you, Dr. Splucky has been a partner of mine in the world of anesthesia for quite some time, and one of the best educators I've ever seen in or out of the operating room. So, round of applause. And without further ado, Sophie, come on, last but not least.
Thank you so much. So when I was growing up, my dream was to either become an artist or an architect, right? Because they're both very, very creative. I like to draw, and this is something I really liked. My parents said, you cannot be an artist, you're never going to earn any money. My grandmother said, you cannot be an architect because she was a brilliant architect, and so was my grandfather, and so I will never, ever, ever be as good as them. So I decided that I would do science because it's also very creative. And like art and architecture, there's lots of drawing and you need to display your data and make beautiful figures. There's things, the creativity is the same. So I then thought, okay, you know what, I will do some physics, and I'm going to do astrophysics. And I'm going to go to university in England, and I was growing up in France because my mother is French, and my father is from America, he's from Philadelphia. So I really wanted to learn how to speak English, and I wanted to know how to do research in English. So I had to go to England, that was the closest place. So I got applied to university, and I got interviewed for the best university, Cambridge. It's like really one of the top. And I asked for help to my science teacher. Can you please help me for this interview? Because I don't speak English really well. It's going to be an interview in English. I need to do my best. And he was like, Sophie, I am not going to help you because science is not a world for women. Right? So I was told, no, just forget about it. And the thing is that for me, when I'm told you can't do it, it really makes me say, I'm going to prove you wrong. Right? So sometimes being told no is actually a very good. So it was very good. I went to Edinburgh, another university. I met my husband there, so it was brilliant. I had a really nice time. And I did astrophysics at first. And then I wanted to study planets, so then I did a master's in remote sensing and image processing. And then I wanted to continue doing that, understanding solar system and the planets. And then somebody really famous offered me to do a PhD with him, and he was building the next big satellite for studying Antarctica and Greenland. And I was like, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to use all of my remote sensing skills to understand how ice is changing, how sea level is changing. And I went to meet him, and he was like, no, Sophie, I don't want you to do remote sensing. I want you to do modeling. I want you to create models and do math and understand how they're going to change in the future. And I was like, well, that's not why I wanted to meet you. But the thing is that I was French, still living in England, and he was the only one willing to pay me for my PhD. So I had no choice, right? So I basically just said, okay, fine. So I did that with him. And so he, in a way, opened a lot of doors to me because he was very scary, right? In his world, he was very, very scary. And there was even a saying in the British Antarctic Survey, this big place, that's very fancy for my research. If you say his name 3 times, he appears. So you do not say his name 3 times. So he was a very scary person. But the nice thing about working with somebody who scares everybody, it means that people think you're brilliant, right? Because you can cope with this person. So I was not brilliant. I was just getting along. But it meant that I had a lot of opportunities afterwards given to me because I worked with somebody that was very, very hard to work with. So my biggest mentor is my grandmother, who told me, you can't be an architect, because she always told me, actually, whatever you do the best you can, because you never know who's watching. And she was right. So throughout my career, I got opportunity because somebody was watching when I was doing something I thought that was the most boring thing ever. They actually, somebody watched. So when I finished my PhD with him, I was at a conference, and I was doing a problem that was very complicated, how ice moves in a very tricky part. And I got lots of job offers because it was a problem that was very important scientifically, but also because I was working with this really hard man to work with. And one of the person who tried to recruit me was a scientist from NASA. And he said, Sophie, this is such a shame that you're not American. And I was like, well, actually, my father is American, so I have 2 citizenship. So he was like, great, because now you can come and work at NASA for us, and you can be a civil servant. So I was like, okay, fine, that's interesting. My PhD advisor said, you're never going to get a job at NASA. You're an ice sheet modeler. You don't do observations, right? So I was like, that's fine, but I also need to go to the US. I want to go to the US, I need to buy clothes, so I'll just go for the interview and see what happens. And then, I went there, and actually, they really wanted to have somebody, me, creating model, who could tell them how to use the observations they were collecting, what satellites they had to build. So I worked at NASA for many years. It was fascinating. We flew aircrafts, we designed flight lines to measure beneath the ice. It was really cool. You could go into the clean room and develop satellites. So I had a brilliant career there, to the point where I was asked to become the head of my lab, right? And the head of a research group means no more time for research. right? And so basically there was a problem because I basically was like, well, you want me to just be there to sign time cards, and I don't want to do that, right? And also I had little kids, and I was living in Washington, D.C., and it would take me a long, long time to come home in the evening because there's too much people, too much traffic. So I just said, well, I quit, right? You want me to do something? I don't want to do that. I want to do science. I don't want to manage people, right? So along the same time at UB, I had friends that I was working with kind of said, why don't you come and work here? And so that was really good because it was a great place for us at that time. So I quit the civil servants and I became Empire Division professor. And I kept doing my research. For me, that's very important to understand, how future sea levels are going to change. Now, I don't do that by myself, right? I can only do my work with tons of scientists. This is the most amazing job we have throughout the world. I lead this effort of people that say, this is how much sea level you're going to have in a 100 years time scales. Those numbers that I lead and I create and that those scientists around the world publish and work with me gets published into the big climate reports every year, every 5 years, the IPCC reports. And so I was one of those authors of those two. In recognition for my work and leadership of that sea level, I got a piece of Antarctica named after me. So you can Google, there's a piece of ice on Antarctica that's the very key for land. And also my team, the international team, we got the first ever medal given to a big group. So really working with scientists is like the most fascinating aspect because it's a creativity part of how to best use model and observations. And I think I'll stop here so that we have time to have questions. But basically, most of my career was random mistakes.
I wouldn't say mistakes, I would say diversions that ended up even better than the initial. So with that, we're going to have time to do a few questions. And if you've been thinking of those questions, I want to hear from them. And you can ask any of the panelists you would like. So who's going to start us off? All right, jump on in there.
I just have a question for you. What's the most interesting frog you found in the rainforest?
Oh, good question. Thank you. The most interesting observation that we had recently is from the rainforest, the temperate rainforest in actually the United States, in the West Coast, along along the British, Oregon, California, all these the temperate rainforests. So we find these amazing birds nesting on the top of the trees of the redwoods, which is probably 100 feet above the ground, and they had this really fascinating history about how they speciated and how the ice age really shaped their speciation pattern, and that kind of allow us to predict how these forests would behave in the face of climate change. Because over the ice age to the present day, there's lots of fluctuating environment, and the histories of these birds, rainforest birds, allow us to really have a unique angle looking into the rainforest in the future. So that's the most one of the most fascinating thing we learned from the rainforest recently.
Question here.
What's the craziest snake you saw?
The craziest snake. The anaconda of the Amazonian rainforest. They are gigantic, and they can sometimes even eat a deer. Yeah, that's really scary. So we have to, bushwhack in the rainforest, and there's all these adventure stories that I can tell, and that's totally frightening.
Dr. Lin, do you still have time to paint?
Do I? Oh yes, that's the good part. later I learned actually I can connect the dots. It's not like I actually fully gave up of my artistic interest about drawing creatures because you know, these kind of illustrations and the artistic eyes about the creatures really allow us to understand, you know, their plumage, their feathers, and there's a lot of clues from their feathers in terms of their thermal regulations, you know, physiology and how they adapt to the changing environment. So my actual artistic sense get used into my research as well. So that's the really good thing, you know, actually never, you know, as long as we fully engage in our childhood activities, nothing really goes away from us.
Sophie, how about you? Do you still paint?
Not enough, but I do like to make very pretty plots, absolutely, in my presentations.
What is one of the craziest animals you found in the jungle?
Oh, the craziest animals. So one of the craziest one is the tinamous. They are, you know, the living relatives to the extinct moa that lived in New Zealand, but when extinct, you know, they're gigantic. They're like huge dinosaurs, and their relatives are still living in the rainforest of the Amazon, and they lay these glossy, colorful eggs, and yeah, so they're the, you know, like really crazy kind of creatures.
Why did you pick speciation out of everything in biology?
Yes, because this is, you know, the fundamental mechanism for how all these fascinating and weird creatures originated. So we really wonder about the mechanisms, how these creatures become like different species, and you know, how can we become different species from the orangutans, for example. So that's, you know, like really underlying the biosphere that we rely on. And I think is, you know, super profound question still to be answered.
Did you ever go see your dad again and your rest of your family? The dentist one.
I thought it was...
The dentist.
Did you go back and see your family or dad?
Oh, yes. I go every year for Christmas.
It's important to keep going. Although I am fascinated that you could literally go across in your house and just go right to the dental office. I don't know if that's good
It
or
was
bad.
kind of scary sometimes, because I would listen to people like,
I have a question for the dentist. So do you just like work with the tools, or are you like a dentist and you like work with people's teeth?
I do work with people's teeth as well, but my job is to teach. So I have all of the dental students there, and they are seeing the patients, and I am being their teacher there. So it's pretty cool because I get to like six patients at once.
I have two questions. What made you decide to become a dentist?
It was mainly because of my father. So I felt comfortable. Like I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna be a dentist, because I didn't know that anyone could be with these different amazing professions. That was my world when I was a kid.
And then, what animals do you usually, like what species of animals do you specialize in?
Yeah, so we study mostly rainforest birds, like, you know, the moa-like creatures I told you about in the rainforest, and also wood warblers around the forest here, and, you know, like toucans and parrots and all that. But we also, you know, my lab is mostly, so I support my students work on all kinds of rainforest creatures. We also work on, you know, rainforest frogs and plants, and just, you know, to understand their, mostly about their evolutionary history and the future, you know, of species boundaries in the rainforest.
Dr. Spelunky, what is your favorite anesthesia case to do, and what is your least favorite anesthesia case to do? I get that asked too.
think my favorite anesthesia case to do is anything to do with neurosurgery and operating, when the surgeons operate on the brain. It really is a very interesting anesthetic that we have to keep really tight control on the patient's blood pressure and their heart rate, and making sure they don't wake up with a lot of pain, but also making sure that their brain doesn't swell from surgery. So those are really interesting cases and my most favorite. I would say my least favorite cases are the types of cases that sometimes take 12 or 15 hours to complete, when a surgeon is trying to remove maybe something bad from somebody's body, and it takes them a lot of time. And that means the patient is asleep under anesthesia for a long time. So those cases can be really not so nice. They are sometimes a little tricky, and you have to make sure that eventually that patient will wake up at the end of surgery, and we want to make sure that they're nice and warm when they wake up. But it's a very, very long case, and you get tired from being in those cases.
Why did you want to be a nurse?
I was able to witness a few of my family members that had interest in nursing, and I found them to be great role models. They cared a lot about their families and their neighbors and their friends, and the more I learned about nursing, the more interest I had, thinking that I could probably do that. And I didn't really have a lot of options growing up that I felt were something that I could do. There were very limited opportunities, again, for girls, but also it just wasn't really a big thing to have girls go into other professions that maybe are very popular today, like engineering, like some of the sciences, as well as, you know, today every opportunity that's available is available to any girl, and of course any boy, but back then it was pretty limited. So I thought it was a good profession, and I felt like it would be a good fit for me.
So Sophie, where is you have a piece of Antarctica named after you. And it's an ice sheet, or what is it? Like, tell me about this, I'm just fascinated.
Yeah, so it's called the Noriki Foreland, and so it's a little piece that's basically, it's not very big, it's probably the size of your island, right? So it's not that
Pretty
big.
big, right? Yeah.
And hopefully it won't melt. It may melt, but yeah, it's just it's this little piece of.
Do you have a picture of it, like in your office, or do you guys have a geo picture?
I do have a picture, and actually we have my kids decided we're going to have an animal to represent the Noriki Foreland, and so our animal is the guinea pig. So my son made a flag with the guinea pigs and having a snowball fight, and so I hope that one day I'll get there and actually put the flag.
I love that.
Dr. Nowicki, have you ever stood on like a big glacier?
Yeah, I was very lucky to go to both Greenland and Antarctica. And you know the scariest thing, so I go and ski a lot in Kissing Bridge. That's what we love about this area. And so being on a big glacier is like being like on Kissing Bridge, but really, really, really tons of Kissing Bridge, like throughout all that you can see. So it's not that different, but it's just beautiful, and it's just very big white blue skies.
I have two questions for all of you. At the end of the day, do you guys like love your jobs, think that it was worth it to put all the time and effort into it?
Good question.
Most definitely. I think it's really important that you know you make a difference. And if you make a difference in your work, they say you never work a day in your life. That anytime you can bring joy to somebody or the best out of somebody when they're really down in a place where they're sort of out of control or don't have control, like when you're sick or you need to go to a hospital, you have to rely on the people there to make sure that you're well taken care of. And as a nurse anesthetist, I pride myself in making sure that who I take care of, babies, little boys, little girls, adults, elderly people, are well taken care of, and I can speak on their behalf. And one of the greatest things that I think is important is when your patient will tell you that they're really happy to have gotten to know you and thank you for doing your job. I mean, it's my job, and I just say, okay, but when people thank you for doing your job, then you can go home and feel really happy about yourself.
Sorry. So I do very much because we are entering a biodiversity crisis now. So my collaborator from WWF, with the UN, have estimated on average a reduction of 60% of vertebrate biodiversity over 50 years, the recent 50 years. And but we not a lot of biologists are, actually studying these biodiversity that we're rapidly losing before we understand them. So I am the person, advocating for, the few people actually, advocating for the rest of the 8.7 million species that coexisted with our populations, with over millions of years, and we're just rapidly, losing most of them. So I do think, at the end of the day, if I could even, help saving probably, 5% of that, that's like a huge milestone for our society.
So for me, a fascinating about my job is that I'm trying to understand what the future would be that my children and grandchildren will look and experience. How much that the sea is going to change, and therefore how much the shape of the coast is going to change, and cities like New York City might not be the way it is right now. And so just to kind of think that my grandmother lived until she was 106 years old. My kids got to meet her, so there's 100 years difference between them. And so the driver really for me is to see, well, what will happen when my kids maybe live as long as my grandmother does. And so it's really fascinating to do that.
At the end of the day, we feel, as a dentist, I always feel grateful to help people, or to prevent pain, or to relieve pain. And I know that whatever I'm learning in my research, whatever we are doing in the dental school, in science, my students will learn that, and they will continue that, and they will become better than us, and that's science. Science never stops. Whatever we know today, in 5-10 years, we will evolve. So I'm really happy to be a part of the history.
Well, I want to be mindful of time. Now, those that have questions, you're going to have your chance to go up in front of these panelists, because I think if some of you have extra credit that you have to get a signature. Yes. So, what I'd like you to do is to remember those questions. You're going to have a few minutes in front of each of the panelists if you wanted to ask those questions, and I want you to get them answered tonight if you can. If you don't get them answered, please have your teacher or you contact me. I will get you in touch with the panelists if it's okay, to make sure that they answer each and every one of your questions, because they're that important. Okay? So without further ado, though, I'd like to say thank you to the panelists by giving them a little gift on our behalf. Kids? These are my kids, if you guys don't know. And from there we have a book for each of you to say thank you for being part of our Amelia Earhart panel. And we also have some flowers for you to show how much we truly appreciate all of the energy, effort, and enthusiasm you have brought to us tonight. It's with our great pleasure here from the Grand Island community that we thank you for sharing your gifts with us.
Thank you.
And with that, let the student onslaught commence. Please come down this side, though, on this one side here, Okay, and then you're gonna come across the front and then exit, okay? So go ahead, get the first one. You got it, guys.